Thanks, everyone. Thank you for joining in today. My name is Vivek. I'm the VP of Product at Indusface. And today we are going to talk about the trends of attacks that we observed across all the applications that's protected behind us in the last quarter. Before we go into the webinar, let me give you a quick introduction about Indusface. Indusface is a cybersecurity startup. We are in the business of protecting web applications and APIs. We have customers from all over the world. You could see some of the major logos or major customers who have trusted their application to be protected by us. One of the things that we wear as a badge of honor is the Gartner Peer Insight. In the Gartner Peer Insight WAP report, we have been chosen as the customer choice 2 years in the running. Not only that, 100% of the customers have said that they will recommend us to their peers, which is something that we are very proud about. With that, let me get into the crux of this webinar. In today's webinar, we'll be talking about the current state of application security, the trends that we observed between the 2 quarters, how the trends between the two quarters, last quarter and this. What are the best practices that you should be observing as security experts to protect against these attacks? And finally, what does this all tell us? With that, let me get started. So the current state, how does the current state of cybersecurity looks like? As I talked about this in a webinar starting of this year, cybersecurity or the cybersecurity state remains grim, right? As you read every day, there will be a lot of news coming around the cyber attacks that is happening and how that is disrupting the way of life. Some of the attacks that we came across recently is an attack on ABB. It was a ransomware attack where some of their systems were compromised, and then to stop the spread of the attack, they had to disconnect VPNs for their employees, which led to a lot of disruption. We are also seeing a lot of news around DDoS attacks which are politically motivated to bring down news channels. One of those which we recently saw is a DDoS attack around the Polish news channels, which was launched from Russia. Last month, similarly, I read another DDoS attack that was launched again by Russia on a chess broadcasting network, right? Skylink was brought down again by DDoS attacks from Russia. So what we are seeing is attacks are widespread. It is no more just to breach or get some data. It is more towards ransomware. It is more politically motivated to meet an end, right? So that's the kind of attacks that we are seeing. Even Ferrari was recently breached, where some of the sensitive data were leaked. So that's the current state of the situation. But the truth of the matter is, for every attack that you read in the newspaper, there might be thousands of other attacks that is happening that is not visible at all, right? Every day, every site is always under threat. Even if you launch a simple website and leave it over the internet, you can see random requests that is starting to coming in, right? And there are crawlers that is always crawling, trying to look for what are the various attack surfaces that is available where we can attack and get some sensitive data or do other malicious activities. So no application is safe. All applications are under threat all the time. And this is what we also see for the applications that are protected behind us. For about 1,400 sites that is protected behind us, we saw about 1 billion attacks in the last quarter, right? In just one quarter, we saw about 1 billion attacks. That kind of tells you the volume of attacks that is happening and the state of application security at this point of time, right? So, what do you do about it, right? So, as we, if you have read or have seen our messagings, one thing that we constantly talk about is a risk-based application security approach, where we say, hey, you should first identify the risk posture of your application. You should identify the vulnerabilities that are there in your application and build your protection around it. So in that lines, in our AppRunner solutions, we have an automated scanner which will help you identify the risk posture of your application. So this is the trend that we see from those scanners, right? In the last quarter across these applications, we saw about 24,000 open vulnerabilities. Out of these 24,000 open vulnerabilities, about 31% of them were critical and high vulnerabilities. What do I mean by critical and high is that these are vulnerabilities if when exploited would cause serious harm, right? It is based on the nature of the vulnerabilities and the exposure of those vulnerabilities, we mark it as critical and high. So out of the 24,000 vulnerabilities, about 31% of these vulnerabilities were critical and high vulnerabilities. And what we also saw was majority of them were open for more than 180 plus days, right? So that's a worrying sign. But it is also because of the nature of how this application industry works, right? AppSec world works. Even if you are able to find these vulnerabilities, it's not easy to get them patched. You have to upgrade a version or you have to change the code, but then it has to go through a dev cycle. And obviously, there are other priorities that the business has. So always these things gets delayed, and these vulnerabilities remain open. In all this while, there were about billion attacks that were happening, right? So that's what we observed across our applications and the applications that are being protected. This 1 billion is more about a 30% increase in a quarter on quarter across the applications that we have. So you can see the attack trends continue to increase. The major countries where we are observing the attacks are from regions like India, United States, and Senegal. That's just an indication of where the majority of attacks are coming from. But more and more what we are observing is attacks are not localized. It can happen from any region. So because especially with the cloud world where all these resources can be launched from anywhere, it's not bound to any locality anymore, right? Even an attacker who wants to attack who's sitting in Russia can launch an attack from India, right? So that's very easy to do. So the locality of attacks are not very very indicative, but these are the trends that we see. So further looking into or analyzing how these attacks happen and how the protection spread, right? What we saw was of all the attacks that were happening, apart from the DDoS attacks, all the other attacks that were happening, about 68% of them were protected by our core rule sets. So these core rule sets are the basic or the default rule sets that comes with our WAF solution. These are the rules that we apply on day zero as the application onboards. And these rules are again fine-tuned for applications need by reducing the zero false positive, and this is done by our team. So because the false positives are removed and we guarantee a zero false positive, these rules remain in block mode, and this is effective, right? And this has been able to protect about 68% of the rules. And if you look at the zero-day trends that we see, of the zero-day vulnerabilities that were of matter that our security team observed in the last 3 months, about 99% of them were by default blocked by the core rule sets. So this kind of proves the efficacy of our core rules, where it is broader in nature and it has a wide coverage, which allows us to protect not only for the known threats but also for the unknown threats that comes in. That said, what we also see is that there is an increase in the number of attacks that is being blocked by what we call as virtual patches, right? So virtual patches are nothing but custom rules that are written by our security team to meet the application's needs. So if there is a vulnerability is found, and if those vulnerabilities are not being patched by the core rule sets that are being found in the core rule sets in the WAF, then customers can request for custom rules, and these custom rules will be patched, will be written by our security experts, and it will protect against those those vulnerabilities in a surgical manner. So what we saw was about 32% of the attacks that originated on the applications were blocked by these custom rules. So more and more what we are seeing is there is a need to also invest on virtual patching to ensure that all these applications are comprehensively protected. If you look in our application, in our product, we have a very unique way of showing how the vulnerabilities are working and what are the vulnerabilities. So if you could see, we say, hey, these are the vulnerabilities, these are protected by core rule sets, certain things needs custom rules. And when you see what are the vulnerabilities that needs custom rules, you can quickly come here. You can see that, hey, these are the vulnerabilities, but these are not patched. But these can be patched by custom rules. And customer has to just request for a custom rule here. And a request will go to our backend security team, who will write a very surgically accurate rule, understanding what is the vulnerability, what is the application nature, and will patch those vulnerabilities to ensure that the protection is accurate. Let's demonstrate it with an example here, right? One of the vulnerabilities that we saw about the last year is a Spring is on the is a RC vulnerabilities in the Spring framework, right? Spring framework is an MVC controller which is used for storage management and configuration management, right? So it is widely used in a lot of Java applications. So there was an RC vulnerability which was exposed as a zero-day vulnerability. Now, in the normal course of action, what would happen is the framework would be updated. There will be a newer version which will not have a vulnerability, and then you would be asked to upgrade, right? But all of you guys would know it's not as such an easy affair, right? If you have to upgrade an application, now you have to go through the dev cycle. You have to ensure that the QA testing is done. Obviously, none of these upgrades are very straightforward. There will be obviously other complications and implications because of this, which will eventually make the upgrade cycle to be delayed, leaving the critical vulnerability open. And as I said, there are vulnerabilities that are open for more than 180 days. So instead of that, how we solve it with virtual patching is similarly, we would have found this vulnerability, you would have seen it in the portal that, hey, this is the vulnerability that exists. And now you can go and say, hey, request for custom rules. And when a custom rule is requested for it, what would happen is our team will write an surgically accurate custom rule to protect against those. So how would that happen? In this case, the vulnerability was an RC vulnerability, and it was done by getting access to certain parameters of the class, which should not be available for remote users, right? And how it was done was by sending such a payload, which has a class module, class loader. So that was a kind of module, that was a kind of the payload that was sent to exploit this vulnerability, right? Now our security experts looked at this vulnerability and saw that, hey, such payloads, right? Generally, the payloads that was meant to exploit these vulnerabilities should not be part of normal web traffic, right? These are not a function calls that would be done remotely. It would be done by local applications and within the network in majority of the time. So if there is a payload that is coming in with this kind of class module or class loader, then we would block it, right? So that's the power of virtual patching, where we can quickly write a rule depending on how the exploits are happening to exploit the vulnerabilities, ensuring that the vulnerability, though that exists in the application, it will never be exploited because the WAF, which is in middle, will block all the requests that is coming in to exploit that vulnerability. You may ask that, okay, there might be a reason why I need to allow this for a remote user or a remote server or something, right? But then again, it is very surgical, right? It is for a certain user whom you know, who would be calling these users. So we could whitelist these rules only for that user, that IP, or that, yeah, that place or that URI where the requests are being made, ensuring that otherwise your application is protected for such kind of attacks. So that's the power of virtual patching. And what we are seeing is more and more organizations are adopting this virtual patching, and it is providing a lot of value to the customers. As I said, about 32% of the attacks that we observed are blocked by such virtual patches that we had created for the customers. Before I go on, I want to ask a quick poll question to you. We just want to see, in your organizations, do you leverage these virtual patches? We'll be starting the poll question now. We'll give you a couple of minutes to answer this. We'll be closing it shortly. Thank you. Can you publish the results? Okay. So majority of most of you don't use virtual patching. This is something that I would really recommend you to explore. Virtual patching, especially at the WAF level, and especially when it is done by security experts, it is of huge value, right? And as I said, one of the things as part of this webinar is also tell our view on how you should be protecting against the evolving threats. And one of the recommendations that I would have is to explore virtual patching and see how it will be useful for your environment. Moving forward, another major threat vector that we observe is the DDoS trend, right? As I discussed earlier in the sessions, DDoS is something has been employed by various attackers and various guys to bring down your site, and especially the motivation behind this is a lot of other things, right? It could be politically motivated, or it could be also used as diversion, where you do a DDoS attack, you create panic in the system, and when all your security team is trying to resolve that in the backend, they are trying to get some data leak and other things, right? So the motivations for DDoS attacks are a lot. What we are seeing is there is a continuous attacks using these threat vectors. We saw about 31% of all the sites that were which is under our protection saw some form of DDoS attack in the last quarter. We saw about 500 million DDoS, 500 million DDoS attacks that we saw and blocked, right? And it is about 48% more than what we saw last quarter. So that's a significant jump. So one of the things that as security experts, you should be looking into is to how secure is your application, how are you handling the availability of the application, is your application protected against DDoS threats? As I said, we are seeing DDoS threats from India, US, UK. Again, the region is just an indicator at this point of time, nothing more than that, because attacks can happen and do happen from any part of the world nowadays, right? So that's the things around DDoS attacks. And one thing that we also saw was one thing that was working for customers behind us was the URI-specific DDoS protections that we are providing to customers. Based on the different applications and how the applications have been built and what are the various protections that were being built, The URI-based DDoS attacks are protected from 12 to 97% of all the DDoS attacks that the application saw, right? So the effectiveness varies, but what we see is it has been very useful in cases where it has been employed effectively. So quickly, what do we mean by URI-specific DDoS attacks is that we are providing granular controls around DDoS instead of saying that, hey, for my application, allow certain limits of requests for a user and the likes. What we do is, in the case of URI-based, we give a granular control where customers can configure specific parts of their application, specific critical parts of the application. They can configure different limits, right? And all these things are backed by our behavioral-based DDoS policies. So customers do not have to guess what is the rate limits. We tell them, hey, what is the behavior of your typical users, what is the maximum, and all those things. And based on that, you could configure, or customers could configure the URI-based rate limits. Some of the typical examples where customers have effectively used is an protection of their login pages, right? So typically they might have a lot of requests for their application, but a login, a user should not be making more than 2-3 requests a minute, right? So they can give a very granular, specific rate limits for a URI page. Similarly, for critical assets like a checkout page and the likes, they can create a well-crafted URI-based DDoS policies, which will eventually help in protecting against these attacks. Right. So that's something that we have observed. I mean, just going to give you a quick way of how we show this, but I mean, I'm not going to go into the details, but this is my portal here. If you want to create a DDoS or URI-based DDoS protection, all you have to do is come here. If you are creating an IP-based URL limits, just and provide which is the URL that you want to protect, right? So and then you can say that eventually, I mean, I've given a dummy URL here, but otherwise you'll see the trend of those users, and then you could set the various values for how you want to configure your DDoS policy. The best part is you will know the trend, right? So you can say, hey, start blocking at 200% of max or 250% of max, which would eventually adjust to the behavior of your users rather than you guessing what the rate limit should be. So this is something which has been very powerful, and this is something being used effectively by our customers. We have already talked about this. Moving on. So the other part about it is the bot, other threat vector is the bot threat vector, right? This is something that I always say, bot is a tricky beast in that sense, right? Because one thing is you have to classify a request into whether it is coming from a human and a bot, which has its own challenges. And then you have to classify further based on the behavior of the bots, whether the bot is a good bot or a bad bot, right? Because you don't want to block all the bots, because even a Google crawler is a bot, right? But you would not want to block a Google bot, otherwise it will affect your SEO rankings. So you have to be careful about how you deploy protections around these bots. So it's a tricky beast. What we have seen across our applications that we are protecting is that we saw about 6 million bot attacks, and almost all sites had some form of bot attacks which we had blocked, right? Again, bots doesn't have geography, but the major attacks that we observed was from India, US, and UK. Again, giving a quick demo on the portal side of things, we have a bot protection that kind of gives you the visibility of the entire solution here. I think it's taking some time to load. So anyway, I'll move on, but we'll come to that later. So, but in the bot protection solution, what we show is the trends of what are the requests that is coming, how the modules are behaving, whether and various modules would add a risk score to each of these requests, and customers will have a control to set their risk postures, whether they are paranoid about bots or they are not very paranoid about bots, depending on which the mitigation action kicks in. So this is another major threat vectors that we are observing, and I would definitely recommend you to see, at least you have any mechanisms to detect whether all the requests are coming from, how many requests are coming from bot, whether they are good bots, bad bots. You see if you have those mechanisms in place, and if you are able to classify them, right? So that's important, or the first step around bot protection. Now coming to various industry trends that we observed, right? We have customers across all these spectrum, and what we see is that bot attacks we were seeing in majorly in banking and healthcare sectors. One major trend that we saw was that we saw a sudden increase in attacks on sites in the insurance sector. That might be just seasonal in nature, because around the tax filing times there would be a lot of surge of requests around the insurance industry. But again, it may be seasonal or it may be a growing trend. We are not sure at this point of time. But on the banking sectors, one of the major trends that we saw was the majority attacks that were getting blocked were because of the virtual patching, which kind of makes sense, right, if you analyze it more, right? Because banking is a very governed industry, so they are more security conscious. So they would be kind of ensuring that all their vulnerabilities are properly protected and patched, right? So so most of these customers who are from the banking industries are leveraging our virtual patching in a more significant manner, which is resulting in more protections or more coverages that is coming from the custom rules perspective. So this is some of the industry trends that we saw based on what the various applications that we have, and how the attack patterns changed quarter on quarter. On the vulnerability side of things, these are the top 5 vulnerabilities that we saw across our applications: XSS, HTML injection. So something that is that continues to be there. I mean, these are not any new vulnerabilities. These are the categories of vulnerabilities that has been there forever, but still applications continue to have these vulnerabilities. And the worst part is that many of these vulnerabilities remain open for more than 180 days, as I said in the previous slides. So again, without virtual patching, this is a very serious concern, because these are proper critical vulnerabilities or vulnerabilities that are significant in nature. And if attackers are able to exploit it, then it would be of serious issue for the applications, right? Fortunately, these guys do have our WAF before them, and most of them have ensured that all these vulnerabilities are virtually patched. But that said, if without it, this would be a very serious concern. So before we go further, one more poll question. Just wanted to see how is your patch cycles based on the vulnerabilities that you identify. How long does it take in your organization to patch these vulnerabilities? We'll give a couple of minutes before we close the webinar. Close the poll, sorry. You publish the results. 30 to 90 days. That's great. I mean, I think many of you guys have been doing better than the industry average, at least from what we see, which is a very good sign. But again, even with from a 30 to 90 days, that's a significant enough time that vulnerabilities remain open and exposed, right? So again, I will say look for secondary protection solutions like virtual patching and others before you get it patched. So you get the virtual patching immediately, and then you have enough leg room to go and get these fixed in the code like you do always. So, as I said, with this attack trends, right? What is the need of the hour? As you patch your vulnerabilities in the code, do look for the vulnerabilities that are there in your application, understand the risk posture, get it fixed in the code. But before that, you also need a WAF solution that works for you, right? So a WAF solution that protects you from end to end, that starts with you from day zero, right, and ensures that the false positives are not there, and there is a complete coverage along with a managed offerings, which helps you patch the vulnerabilities that are found in the applications with an SLA, right? We in Aptrana we provide an SLA bound custom rules offering. So depending on the vulnerabilities that are there, like critical vulnerabilities, if a custom rule is raised for it, we will patch it within 24 hours. So that's the kind of SLAs that we provide, and we recommend that you look for such kind of solutions, right? A solution, WAF is a complex thing. You should not just go with the product, right? You should look at a solution that works for you, where you have not been asked to be the security experts. Instead of that, the vendor does the heavy lifting for you and ensures that the vulnerabilities are patched without affecting your business, right? So that's kind of what I will leave you with as one of the final thoughts that I have. So with all this, right, what does the finding tells us, right? The findings tells us the obvious, right? First is identify your risk postures. Please do continue to identify the risk posture of your applications. What is your weakest link? Because no matter how good your protection solutions are, if there is a weakest link which is not protected, then that is what an attacker would exploit, right? That's how an attacker's mind works. They do a reconnaissance, they try to see what is vulnerable in your attack surface, and then they will try to exploit it. So do continue to understand what is your risk posture. Look for a WAF solution, as I said, which meets your need, which works as a solution for you instead of being just a product. See if the WAF solution is able to help you reduce your risk postures without affecting your business, without affecting without leading to false positives. One of the things that we always see in the industry is that WAF remains in log mode, right? And that is majorly because of the problem of false positives. So if you are looking for a WAF solution, do look for that and see if your WAF solution works for you and you are able to put WAF in block mode without any false positives. About 99 to 100% of our applications always remain in block mode. So, and that is because of the power of the managed offerings that we provide, where we work with the customers end to end to remove the false positives without compromising security. Be prepared for sophisticated attacks like DDoS attacks, bot attacks. Do prepare yourself. Do understand what is your capabilities when you are looking for DDoS solutions. See how scalable it is. Also, do look for is it a metered or unmetered DDoS protection, because at times DDoS attacks might happen, the solution might block you, but then end of the day you might get a nasty bill. So do look at those things also. And finally, cybersecurity is as I said, it's always evolving, right? There are new threats that is always emerging. So look for a solution that keeps up with it, right? That is constantly monitoring the industry trends and ensuring that the protections are up to date. So security is just not a product, it's a product plus service. So as I always say, look for a solution, not just a product, right? That's the final thought that I'll leave you with. So before we end the webinar, a quick question. I have kind of demonstrated what Aptron also does. So how many of you would be interested on a demo of Aptron? Okay, just to conclude, if for people who do not know, this is Aptrana. We are a risk-based web application and API protection solutions. We work on 4 pillars. One is the risk detection, where we, as I said, we help you identify the risk posture of the application. We have our automated scanner. We complement it with manual pen testing to ensure that you have a comprehensive view of the risk posture of your application. The next pillar that we provide is the risk protection, which ensures that all the risk that is identified is protected using our WAF solution, which also has DDoS protection and bot mitigation solutions. We have also recently released an API security module, which essentially provides a API-specific coverage around OS top 10 APIs and posture security models, right? So that's risk protection for you. The most important piece is the risk monitoring, where we provide a managed WAF to you, where we ensure that the false positives are removed and the virtual patchings are done in a surgically accurate manner by our security experts, ensuring that there are no false positives and there are maximum coverage that is possible. We also provide support during sophisticated DDoS and bot attacks, ensuring that custom protections are built in to thwart sophisticated attacks. And last but not least, we bundle in with a CDN to ensuring that you don't have to compromise speed for security. So that's a complete offering that we bring to the table from Aptrana perspective, where we provide an end-to-end application security platform. With that, I come to the end of my presentation today and end of the webinar. Happy to answer any questions if you have. We are open for questions now. Is there any questions? If you want, you can also unmute. Yes, of course. Aptana WAF is not different from AWS WAF, where AWS WAF is more tailored towards applications that are there on AWS, and it is more meant to be managed by the customers, right? Whereas our WAF is something that we manage and we ensure that that we provide an end-to-end protection. We provide zero false positive guarantee, which AWS WAF would not provide. We provide a risk base of which AWS WAF would not provide, and we do provide behavioral-based DDoS, which again is not something that AWS has. Also, the bot protection, the sophisticated modules, ML and AI-backed bot protection that we provide is not something that AWS has. So yeah, it's significantly different. I would essentially recommend you to try it out, try a demo. It's a 14 days free trial with no commitment. So you could do a 14-day trial, play around with our product, see how effective it is, compare it with AWS WAF, and then make a decision.
Will it be deployed in AWS cloud and in Azure cloud?
We are a SaaS solution, so we are agnostic to where your application is. It can be in any cloud or in your private data center. What will happen is you will have to, as you bring your application behind us, you'll have to route the traffic through our infrastructure. We will inspect it and we will send it to your origin wherever it is. We have data centers all over the world. We will onboard your application closest to your application.
Is it available in the marketplace?
No, it is not currently available in the marketplace, but you could again to try out our free trial, and we have easy credit card based options to start with. We are exploring marketplace, but no, at this point it is not available.
Do you have enterprise deployment or only cloud-based SaaS?
We are only a cloud-based SaaS solutions. Obviously, the plans are varying. We have enterprise specific plans, which caters for thousands for applications, other things. But in all cases, it is a pure play SaaS solution, not something which would be deployed in customers' data centers.
How are the charges?
Our charges are pretty straightforward. It is actually on two levers. One is the number of applications that you want to protect and the data that goes through your application, right? So we start with our advanced plan starts at $99 per month, and there are various other plans that go forward with, right? But on simple things, there are two levers on which we charge our customers: number of application and the total traffic.
Do you perform VAPT as well? If yes, what will be the charge for one-time VAPT of mobile and web app?
Yeah, we do provide VAPT solutions. I'm not aware of the direct code for this, right? So I would recommend you to drop a note to sales@indusface.com. Somebody will reach out to you, or I'll ensure that, if your name has been provided, I'll ensure that somebody reaches out to you with the right details.
Can your product automatically detect OWASP top 10 and guide them how they can be solved?
Yes, we have complete coverage around OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. So how it works is we write surgically accurate rules as part of our core rule sets to ensure that there is a protection across the OWASP top 10 threats. And as the threats evolves, our security team ensures that these policies and rules are continuously updated. Apart from that, there are obviously the custom rule options also, which will provide a broader coverage.
How much application availability is affected due to false positive of virtual patching? Any figures? In what cases are false positives high?
See, false positives, again, we like to say that we try to have no false positives, and that's how we try for. How we do our virtual patching is that when we create a virtual patch, we will put it in what we call as monitoring mode with the live traffic going through it, see how the policies are being triggered, and based on that, we'll fine tune those policies further to ensure that the triggers are not affecting legitimate traffics before we move it to block. So all these actions are done from the back end, and so generally we try to avoid or the false positive is close to zero. But that said, there are times when false positives happen. The reasons why false positives happen is due to sudden changes in the application, right? So there might be new kind of request patterns that might be emerging because of how the application has been changed and other things, which might end up triggering certain rules, right? So which would eventually cause false positives. In those cases, what we do is we recommend the customers to keep us informed when such application changes happen, so that we can monitor those applications and ensure that if there are any misfiring of rules, we can fine tune them. Otherwise, if there are any triggers that happen at live, there are also options where we can immediately move these roles to log mode, monitor it, and then our team will fine tune it to ensure there are no false positives. So that's kind of how we work around the problem of false positives. This is always a problem in any WAF where it's always a tug of war between false positives and false negatives, right? So the one thing that we assure is we work closely with the customers. We act as an extended security team for them and ensure that the false positives are removed and WAF remains in block mode.
Can you compare Akamai WAF with your product?
Again, I can compare. There are a lot of charts that is available. Few things that come into my mind is again the same things, right? One is the risk-based approach that we provide. I don't think Akamai provides that. The managed offerings that we provide, it is vastly different from the managed offerings that Akamai provide, right? And apart from that, the behavioral DDoS and bot protections. Again, do reach out to our sales team. We have a complete deck which provides you the complete line by line comparison between Akamai WAF and Aptron. But this is on a high level. This is what it is.
Does your product work on WordPress websites? What is the process?
I mean, again, it works seamlessly. That's no issue. The process is the same. You can just sign up for our solution and then route your traffic through us. We will inspect the traffic and then pass on the request to your WordPress site.
Last time when I tried a similar product, it crawled my website and somehow my server went down. Will that happen with your application?
See, I mean, if your application crawled your website and application went down is something surprising. But anyways, I mean, we have an automated scanner, right? The automated scanner would definitely crawl your website to try and find vulnerabilities, but it is written in such a manner that it should not bring your application down or it is not intensive on your servers. That said, we can always fine tune the number of requests that a scanner sends to you in a particular period of time and all those things to ensure the load is less, or you can also configure in such a way that the scanner happens in a non-business hour so that there's less load on your application. When there is less load, the scanner runs. Right. So there are the various mechanisms on which you can work around this. But yeah, we do crawl, but we would not bring down your site.
You can also crawl the QA site.
Yeah, and we could also try it with a QA site first, see everything is working, and then try it for a production site. So that's also an option that you guys have.
Is virtual patching the permanent solution or is it temporary? Do we recommend all identified application vulnerabilities?
See, it's a good question. Virtual patching is an effective solution, right? From an outside-in perspective, as an attacker is trying to exploit a vulnerability, it is as effective as patching your vulnerability on the code. But that said, it is always a good practice to get your code fixed whenever possible, right? Because it's a good hygiene practice, one. And then if, for any reasons, if you have to switch out from WAF or any other reasons, you will be immediately exposed to a lot of other things, right? So it's always it's always best to protect it at the source. But from the effectiveness perspective, I don't see a reason why virtual patching should not be as effective as being protected or as a code being patched at the code level, right? So yeah, so a long answer to your short question, but it is effective. But I do recommend that you also patch it at the end.
Will you certify our application with your WAF like PCI DSS, SOC, GDPR, etc.?
We don't do certifications, but we will help you. I mean, having our solution will help you get through these complaint processes a lot easily, right? Because like PCI, one of the classes do recommend doing regular scans and do recommend having secondary protection controls like WAF. So we cover both these areas. So that classes would be met by having a runner solution. But we don't provide certifications. The solutions would help you meet your compliance needs.
Yeah, this is the previous question. The scan was running for around 3-4 hours. That's what they said.
Okay. Yes, I mean, again, scanners will run for a few hours, but still, it should not bring down your application. Again, you can reach out to our team, and we'll work with you, and we'll figure out that things work for you.
Virtual patching is done upfrontly from your side, or customer has to request for it?
See, again, right? The core rule sets and the protection that comes with the core rule sets, that starts automatically. And as vulnerabilities are detected, you are given a view into, hey, how many of these vulnerabilities are directly protected by the existing rules? What others need virtual patching? And for the things that require virtual patching, customers have to request for virtual patching, and then we will do it. The reason being, sometimes the customers would probably prefer certain vulnerabilities to be patched directly at the WAF level, at the application level, at the WAF level. So we leave it to customers' choice to determine at what points do they want virtual patching, and depending on that, we will create the virtual patches for that, and we will patch those vulnerabilities. And all these things are SLA backed, so from the time you request for custom rules, the SLA starts, the clock starts, and what various severity of those vulnerabilities, the patch, there are various SLAs that we. That's it. Okay, I think it was very lively. I think the Q&A was lively and a lot of good questions. I hope the webinar was of use to you guys and it was worth the time. Please share any feedback if you have. Thanks for joining in. Pleasure.